So this brings us to Bill Burr. So I have to say, Bill Burr is so Bill Burr, I used to really enjoy his work because he says CEOs should live in fear if they don't act in the way that he would have them act in a system that he has no fixes for, by the way. I don't believe that Bill Burr holds the same standard for comedians. The argument goes something like this on the left. People like Bill Burr mock the vulnerable. They mock the marginalized, and thus they are a danger to the vulnerable and the marginalized. So presumably, Bill Burr should have to live in fear of making a joke. Bill Burr should have to live in fear because he doesn't know who he's damaging.
So for the past 2 weeks, comedians have been going viral, getting a lot of attention and making a lot of people mad with the things they've said, from Andrew Schulz taking shots at Kendrick Lamar with some very corny but effective jokes, to Bill Burr making global headlines with his commentary and his takes on the whole United Healthcare CEO situation. And he also made some people mad, including Ben Shapiro. Now, funny enough, we made a video not that long ago going over Ben Shapiro, calling out Bill Burr on Bill Maher's podcast and calling him an asshole. And although back then it wasn't that serious, it wasn't that big of a deal, now Ben Shapiro is doubling down and spending more time talking about and calling out Bill Burr. And so there is a chance that maybe Bill Burr will actually respond, especially because even Ben Shapiro's own fan base, his own audience, is disagreeing with him and calling him out on the comments. And so in this video, we'll take a look at what Bill Burr said, also what Ben Shapiro responded with. But also, I wanted to talk about and compare how two different comedians are going viral and making headlines for two completely different reasons. In this case, Bill Burr and Andrew Schulz. So let's get started.
You know what's annoying me about this kid who killed this CEO is none of these news programs are talking about the incredible lack of empathy from the general public about this because of how these insurance companies treat people when they are at their most vulnerable, after we've all given them our money every fucking month, and now we finally need you, and all you do is deny us. And then these and all of these things are taking the pictures of their CEOs off their websites. You know, I got to be honest with you, okay? I love that the CEOs are fucking afraid right now. You should be. By and large, you're all a bunch of selfish, greedy fucking pieces of shit, and a lot of you are mass murderers. You just don't pull the trigger. That's why it looks clean. That's why these people look, oh my God, oh, he was just, walking into a hotel. It's like, okay, but what was his job? What did he do? What was the results of it?
Paul, what's going on in New York? We were just talking about it. That CEO got whacked.
Oh my God, dude.
You know what's funny? I was sitting there reading an article, a guy, they go, oh my God, he's such a great guy. He had a wife and kids, and he's such a great guy. And then you find out he and the other guys he's working for are getting sued for $121 million for dumping a stock and not letting the other people know. It's like, there's your motive.
Dude, anytime I hear CEO of one of the biggest healthcare, it's like, you don't wish it on anybody. You feel horrible for his kids and his wife, of course. But dude, when I saw that and I saw
what is more heartless than a CEO of a corporation? The decision in healthcare, the decisions that they make. This is the thing. I'm not saying what happened should have happened, but I'm just, for them to be like, oh, this is like, why would anybody want to do this? It's like they're denying claims and people are dying. The food supply is poison. It's like the motive out there is wild. It's right up there, Paul, with getting life insurance. The second you get life insurance, whoever is the beneficiary immediately has motive.
Now, when it comes to Bill Burr, I'm pretty sure that most people watching this video are familiar with who he is. I was actually introduced to Joe Rogan's podcast by watching an episode with Bill Burr, and then I became a fan of the show back then. And although there's no denying that Bill Burr has changed a little bit and has been focusing a lot more on his Hollywood projects, when it comes to his stand-up comedy or his comedy he's writing, it hasn't really changed that much, or his commitment to the art form, as cringe as that sounds, it hasn't changed at all. And if anything, he's become a lot better. For example, 2 years ago, he uploaded a video which was a live recording of his podcast in front of an audience, and it quickly became his most viewed video on his YouTube channel because it was great material, even though it did look like he just went up there and quote unquote rambled about whatever he had in his mind. And again, the jokes, the material, they were a lot better than what a lot of comedians are putting out at the moment. And although he did talk about some political topics, the way he talks about it or the things that he does talk about, he always focuses on making it about those in power versus those that are not, instead of just making it this team versus that team. And by the way, that is what Joe Rogan used to do on his podcast. He would call out and have disagreements with anyone, regardless of what they believed in or what they were pushing.
You don't think we have to care about the environment? Like, what do you...
No, not even a little bit. Like,
not even a little bit?
No. Okay, let me clarify this. I don't throw trash on the ground. Like, okay. I'm not saying like we need to like, trash the environment. Like, but do I believe in climate change? No.
You don't believe in climate change. Okay, but this is an incredibly complicated subject.
Right.
And if you would have to talk to a bunch of different scientists and see how they gather data and see what they understand about CO2 levels and what's the danger of them and what can combat it and what could not. Have you done all this, or do you take this flippant opinion based on the party line?
This wouldn't be the hill I died on, right? But it's not about the party. I just genuinely, I've read a ton about it, but I would not be able to come to you and say like, this is my strong opinion. But here's like the easiest way to say this, right?
Okay.
The fact that there is a disparity in the science community about whether or not it's real is enough to...
It's very little.
Yep.
Very little disparity.
But
Most scientists, the vast majority agree that human beings are negatively affecting climate change.
Yeah.
The vast majority.
Yeah, I just don't think so.
But now it does seem like he takes the safer route or the more mainstream position, even though he might claim that it isn't. Because, for example, when he talked about the whole CEO situation, he barely talked about it for 1 minute and didn't really make any wild comments besides pointing out how dark the healthcare industry is. But it does make sense because Joe Rogan is now part of a massive corporation, Spotify. And so I don't believe he has the same freedom to talk about whatever he wants to as much as he claims he has. And so when it comes to Bill Burr, it is really interesting that even though his podcast, his solo comedy podcast, has been going on for way longer than the Joe Rogan Experience has, and it's mainly been audio only, it still competes with the top comedy podcast at the moment, which is absolutely insane because he essentially went viral and made headlines without even trying, while someone like Andrew Schulz is trying very hard to get a reaction from Kendrick or his fan base. And although he's been very successful at it, it does come across as him being way too thirsty and desperate for attention. So once again, if you compare Andrew Schulz to Bill Burr, on the one hand, you have Schulz, who is essentially begging for Kendrick Lamar and his fans to beef with him. And on the other hand, you have Bill Burr, who has been, called out by Ben Shapiro multiple times and doesn't even bother to respond, even though it could be a big deal. And by the way, don't forget to please like the video. It helps out so much, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
So this brings us to Bill Burr. So I have to say, Bill Burr is so Bill Burr, I used to really enjoy his work. I mean, on occasion, I still enjoy his work. He's a comedian, which means he's very hit or miss. His Red Rock special, for example, hilarious. I'm such a Bill Burr fan that I actually bought a ticket for me and my wife and two of our friends to go see Bill Burr at the Hard Rock Casino down here in Hollywood, Florida. And I have to say, it was one of the worst shows I ever saw in my life. And the reason was he was totally disconnected from the audience. Well, that disconnect has continued. You'll remember that he appeared on Bill Maher's show where he declared solidarity with the pro-Hamas students on campus. And now he is proclaiming that he is very happy that CEOs are walking around in fear for their lives. Okay, now, you do get some extra points for being a comedian in today's day and age, meaning that we will tend to give you some more leeway to say edgy things because you're trying to be funny. And it's not clear to me here that Bill Burr is attempting to be funny. This is just his actual political opinion. He's not saying anything funny or insightful here. Here is Bill Burr yesterday explaining that he is perfectly fine with CEOs having to live with full-time security because they fear they might be shot because, after all, they're murderers too. I don't believe that Bill Burr holds the same standard for comedians. There's an argument that's been made by the left. It is a crap argument when made about comedians, and it's a crap argument when made about CEOs. The argument goes something like this on the left. People like Bill Burr mock the vulnerable. They mock the marginalized, and thus they are a danger to the vulnerable and the marginalized. So presumably, Bill Burr should have to live in fear of making a joke. Bill Burr should have to live in fear because he doesn't know who he's damaging.
Now, Ben Shapiro's rant goes on for a while, with a large portion being about Bill Burr. And because I haven't watched Ben Shapiro in a while, I forgot how funny it is to watch him react to different things. I mean, who could forget the legendary moments in which he went over the WAP, the lyrics for WAP, which was absolutely insane. He did also have a pretty big song that was hilariously good. And now it does seem like he's targeting comedians that he doesn't like, which I think it's fair and it's going to be a fun time. But to go after Bill Burr for that joke is absolutely wild, because not only is his own audience in disagreement and calling him out, but it wasn't even that bad at the end of the day. I mean, it was a very reasonable take for a comedian to have. And Ben knows that, because not that long ago, he also had a very reasonable reaction to Tony's joke from the rally. And he also agreed that even though it wasn't the best move or the best material, it wasn't Tony's fault, and instead it was whoever made the decision to hire him, because, you know, he is a roast comedian.
So I just want to get your opinion on that.
I mean, he's a roast comedian and he told a roast joke. So, you know, don't hit the roast comedian for telling a roast joke. Hit the guy who booked him. The Shane Gillis stuff, it's so funny. But, you know, like that's a weird move. It's a weird move. It's like strippers at a funeral. Like, I'm not sure exactly what's happening.
Yeah, the joke just bombed. It just was not the right setting.
No, and you could tell the audience was awkward about it. It wasn't like the audience was roaring at these jokes.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to Bill Burr, using that logic, Ben shouldn't be mad that a comedian on his own comedy podcast made a joke about something that happened in the news. And by the way, I completely understand that is what he does. That is Ben's shtick, to call out things that he doesn't like, even if it makes him look silly. But when it comes to Bill Burr and the things that he's calling him out for, because of the things that he said about Tony and the fact that he understands comedy, or he proved that he understands comedy and comedians doing their job, what he's calling him out for doesn't make any sense at all. And it does come across as him simply having a personal grudge against Bill Burr for whatever reason.
You know what's fucked up, Paul, is I've been doing a bit in my act talking about how it was better when the mob was running shit, because they were regulated simply because what they were doing was illegal. And I know that they were making a bunch of money, but they couldn't be flashing around. They had wars, they whacked each other and shit. And I was saying, like, how great would it be to see, like, you know, the head of, Walmart gets whacked by the head of the fucking Target guy, have a nice old-fashioned war and just thin the herd and keep everybody honest. But the problem is, those guys are all on the legal side of stealing. And all of those politicians, they give the politicians the heads up, and then they turn around, they make all these money. Andrew, what were you saying? Nancy Pelosi just made $9 million on some shit? They're gangsters, dude. Gangsters. And then when one of them gets whacked or something, they're like, oh, good, he was such a good guy. It's a dirty game, Paul. Healthcare, dirty game. Dude, I bet all those Giuliani guys were going, dude, was that you? Did you call that? Was that us? Was that us? Because I didn't hear on the meeting. Am I next?
Oh, dude, there was some
like they're all nervous going, wait a minute.
That's actually a great point.
Please tell me that was just some random dude.
That's
because
a great
if that was
point.
Inside and I didn't know that was happening? I got a green light on me? He starts dyeing his hair again.
Yeah, man, that was. I just feel for the kids. That's all I give a.
I do too, and I feel for his wife, and I also feel for that guy, because I looked at his dumb face, and I'm like, this guy just did this career, and it's just as you're moving up, more of your soul has to go away. That's a soulless business, dude.
Now, even though it is interesting the amount of people that are citing and defending what Bill Burr said, which is understandable, I'm one of them. I think it is important to point out that even though he made it look so easy, it is Bill Burr, one of the best comedians at the moment. And I would argue that he has been working on that bit for a while, the joke that he said on his podcast. And in fact, if you listen to a lot of his older comedy, he does have very similar jokes or bits, talking about those in power or bosses of massive corporations and stuff like that. And so even though it might sound like just rambling, I'm pretty sure there was a lot of thoughts behind it. Whereas what Andrew Schulz is doing, it does come across as just lazy comedy. For example, him trying to get Kendrick or his fan base to respond by doing those jokes instead of what he used to do in the past, do a monologue at the beginning of the episode with some pretty solid material. Instead, he's just going for the engagement by being a troll and farming clips from his own podcast. And so when it comes to Bill Burr, it's very clear that he's not doing it for attention or to go viral. And instead, he was just trying out one of his many bits on his own podcast.
You know why Jesus hasn't come back yet? Because he's a
lazy hippie. If he had a man's haircut, high and tight, okay, he would have came back sometime during World War II, I would have thought. Would have paid the Nazis a visit. They never talk about that. 3 days later, he came back, and then where did he go? Is there is there a third part of the Bible they don't have? He was born miraculously. What happened to him? So he dies. He gets crucified for you. All right, for everybody. He dies for our sins, and then what happens? He comes back 3 days later, and everybody's like, holy shit. Anyway, what happened? Then he dies, and he comes back. Guess who's back? Back again. He fucking pushes the rock back. Did he? Did he push the rock back? Did he have he had more of a yoga body. I don't see him fucking moving a rock. Oh, he's Jesus. He went, wah! And the thing just moved out of the way, right? And then Jesus comes back. So then he comes back. He freaks out all his friends. How come he didn't go back and visit the people that stuck him on the cross? So you thought you were going to get rid of me, didn't you? How come he didn't go to the puke rooms in Rome as they were sitting there high-fiving? Oh, well, we showed that fucking hippie a thing or two saying he's a son. What the fuck are you doing here? Sorry, puke room. What the fuck are you doing here? Here?
Now, another big criticism that Ben Shapiro had was that Bill Burr was an asshole. Now, to be fair, even if he was, Bill Burr has been Bill Burr for a while, ever since I can remember, and he's done it to everyone from morning TV show, like that time on that morning TV show where he made both of the hosts very uncomfortable by bringing up what the Catholic churches used to do with the priests and all that stuff. He also did it to podcasters and comedians like Theo Vaughn, Ethan from the H3 podcast, and also Joe Rogan. But on top of that, he also did it to Tony Hinchcliffe. If you go back and rewatch the Kill Tony episode with Bill Burr. And so, to be fair, he has been doing that for a while and to a lot of people. Now, what's really interesting when it comes to Bill Burr is that even his own victims have come out and talked about how even though Bill isn't the nicest in person or the easiest to deal with, they still ended up learning something from that experience or that interaction. And so even though Bill isn't the nicest, you know, he still is the same way with everyone. Whereas with Andrew Schulz, even though he claims that he makes fun of everyone and that everyone gets these jokes, it clearly wasn't the case back when Logan Paul was on the podcast, on the Flirting podcast, and they, on purpose, they avoided talking about CryptoSue or making fun of him, which is absolutely insane. And that episode, to this day, is one of the most disliked episodes of the entire show's history.
We have laws on the books that prevent things like embezzlement. We have laws on the books that punish criminal activity. If you don't like the system, and many people don't, the proper response to that system would be legislation. In a democratic republic, the way that you fix problems is you have open discussions of the details of those problems, and then you try to craft regulatory or legal fixes. You do not say that it is a good thing that CEOs should live in fear of their lives because Bill Burr deems them morally inferior. Bill Burr doing his blue-collar class routine act is a bunch of horse. Bill Burr is worth $14 million, and he makes his money making crap movies for Netflix at this point. Again, this basic idea, if we're going to have a functioning country, you can't justify the murder of people who run their businesses legally in ways with which you disagree. It is one thing to disagree with them. You can call them whatever you want. When you start justifying them living in fear or suggesting maybe they should be murdered, I'm just wondering what the limiting principle here is. Nobody ever says, you know, the NBA could be even better if they paid LeBron James less. Nobody ever says that. It's only with regard to healthcare and other areas that the left cares about that suddenly the profit margin becomes bad. Nobody ever suggests that Bill Burr should make less money in his comedy because obviously the profit margin in his comedy is what is driving it. It's making his comedy worse.
And once again, at this point, I feel like Ben Shapiro has to be trolling, at least when it comes to the money situation, because, I mean, sure, you could make that argument when it comes to the agents and some of the managers, maybe, but when it comes to the actual talents, the comedians or the actual athletes, I mean, they are the main attraction, the core business, and everything and everyone revolves around them. For example, even though in the past we have mentioned and brought up how successful and wealthy a lot of these Rogan Sphere comedians are, we've never made the argument that they should make less money. That's just silly. And so obviously making money is not the problem. The problem is when they let that money change them and it becomes very obvious. When it comes to Joe Rogan, it was strange how little he talked about the whole CEO CEO situation when it was the biggest story for the whole week.
Well, Jamie and I were just talking, and they think they have a photo of the guy who whacked that insurance CEO.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they think they have a photo of his face now.
Oh, they do, huh?
Well, I would think with
From
the
around
amount
the
of
time
cameras.
or they picked it up later.
I think, there's cameras everywhere now, and that's part of the problem with someone. And I don't think this guy was a professional. I think this guy, if I had to guess, some guy who got f***ed over. Apparently that company is really bad on denying claims.
34% denial rate, something
normal's
like that.
like 16.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those guys.
I don't think anybody's going to be crying too hard over that guy.
Yeah, maybe his family, but that's about it.
Yeah.
It's a dirty, dirty business. The business of insurance is gross. It's gross. And especially healthcare insurance. Just gross.
Well, actually, all insurance. I live in California, and all of a sudden, because I live adjacent to any kind of open space, nobody will insure my house because of fire.
Right.
And so suddenly it's like I have a house that's uninsurable, and it's not just me, it's everybody. Mm-hmm. And so it's chaos.
Yeah. I have a friend who's trying to sell a house in California, and it turned out it was $125,000 a year just to get fire insurance.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah, it's insane.
Nuts.
It's insane.
Yeah, but I was evacuated 3 times when I lived there. I used to live in Bell Canyon, and it was rough.
I've been really lucky. I'm almost afraid to say it, all right, because I've been living in the Hollywood Hills, and I've never any of the fire stuff never happened around me.
Yeah, it is just luck. Yeah.
I mean, the benefit of your place is you're at least in a helicopter accessible.
Well, that is
they're
true.
just going to dump all that fire retardant right on top of you.
I literally am kind of at the top of the hill on a bunch of rock.
Yeah.
All right, so if the whole place
nice.
it turns into an inferno, I'm still fucked.
And I think that place has probably been there a while.
Yeah,
It's probably withstood all sorts of calamity.
But yeah, once again, it was interesting seeing how different comedians reacted to this massive situation and what they made out of it. And it will be interesting to see if more comedians talk about the whole Bill Burr situation or even bring up Andrew Schulz versus Kendrick Lamar. I was actually thinking of making a separate video just on Andrew Schulz versus Kendrick because even though I'm a massive Kendrick fan, I do think Schulz is definitely winning, at least for now. However, I feel like there's an angle that nobody is attacking, and it's related to one of his sponsors being the same sponsor that Drake has. So let me know if you want to hear more about that. But also, it will be interesting to see if Bill Burr actually responds to Ben Shapiro, because Ben Shapiro has been taking shots at Bill Burr for a while now. But also, again, it shows you the massive difference between a comedian like Bill Burr and a Rogan Sphere comedian like Andrew Schulz, because Bill Burr essentially went viral and made global headlines by just giving an honest and very in-touch perspective about a massive story on the news, while Andrew Schulz is basically talking about wanting to make love to Kendrick. And when it comes to Ben Shapiro, at this point, I mean, you can't really take him that serious, at least not when it comes to him talking about comedy. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. Leave a like and subscribe to support the channel. Dislike if you didn't like the video. But that is all we have for today. See ya.